Welcome back, university biology students, to today's explainer on evolutionary biology. We're going to examine what is arguably the ultimate survival story of the Permian-Triassic mass extinction. We'll be looking at a creature that somehow defied the absolute worst odds during the most catastrophic ecological collapse in our planet's history. So let's dive straight into this bizarre evolutionary paradox. You might be wondering, how exactly did an unassuming, pig-sized, shovel-faced reptile, a creature that frankly looks like a strange mashup between a bulldog and a turtle, manage to survive what paleontologists literally call the mother of all mass extinctions? Well, today we are going to deconstruct the biological clues behind the survival of our incredibly unlikely protagonist, a dissident known as Lystrosaurus. Here's our syllabus for the day. We're going to cover Earth's greatest mass extinction, anatomy of a survivor, behavioral and physiological adaptations, rapid growth and reproduction, why generalists outlive the specialists, and finally, proof of continental drift. Starting with Section 1, Earth's greatest mass extinction, the post-apocalyptic wasteland. To truly understand this story, we have to travel back about 252 million years ago, to the apocalyptic setting of the end Permian extinction. You have to understand the sheer, unimaginable devastation of this environment. We're talking about an event that wiped out the vast majority of all life on Earth. The climate was incredibly unstable, the air was toxic, and entire food webs just totally collapsed. Yet, in the immediate aftermath of this global crisis, up to 95% of land vertebrates in South Africa's early Triassic Karoo Basin belonged to just one single genus, Lystrosaurus. To put that into perspective, imagine 95 out of every 100 animals you see being the exact same creature. It's an unprecedented level of dominance, and it's literally the only time in Earth's history that a single genus of land animal dominated the globe to such an extreme degree. In biology, we classify Lystrosaurus as the quintessential disaster taxon. That's an organism that not only survives, but severely dominates a highly depleted biosphere right after a mass extinction. Because this event completely eradicated all the large Permian herbivores and carnivores, Lystrosaurus essentially woke up in an empty world. It faced virtually no predators, maybe the occasional archosauriform like Proterosuchus, but that's about it, and absolutely no major herbivorous competitors. This massive ecological vacuum meant it could rapidly re-radiate and spread like wildfire across the supercontinent of Pangaea. Moving right along to Section 2, Anatomy of a Survivor. Let's see how it was built for the crisis. What physical traits actually allowed this heavily built Dicenodon to endure where so many others completely perished? Well, the first huge clue is its highly unusual feeding apparatus. Typical herbivores, as you know, possess rows of grinding and chewing teeth, but Lystrosaurus, totally different setup. It had a really short snout equipped with just two tusk-like upper canines and a horny keratinous beak. Again, think of a weird modern turtle. Its jaw joint was actually surprisingly weak and couldn't move side to side at all. Instead, it used a unique backward and forward shearing action. This let it use a quick, snapping bite to shear off incredibly tough, fibrous vegetation, like the horsetail relatives known as Philotheca, before grinding it up on a horny secondary palate. And that unique skull was paired with a body that was essentially a biological digging machine. Lystrosaurus walked with a semi-sprawling gait, supported by massive, really robust forelimbs that were absolutely perfect for fossorial burrowing. To help with stride length, the lower rear corner of its shoulder blade, the scapula, was strongly ossified. Even cooler, it had 5 massive, unfused sacrovertebrae that made its lower back super rigid, significantly reducing any sideways flexing while it walked. Add in a built-in buttress above the hip socket that stopped the femur from dislocating under pressure, and you have an animal structurally engineered from the ground up to construct life-saving underground burrows. Now, we also have some incredible recent insights into what covered this robust skeleton. Thanks to discoveries made in 2022 of exceptionally preserved mummified specimens from the Karoo Basin, we now know Lystrosaurus had dimpled, leathery, and entirely hairless skin. This gives us a brilliant look at its resilient exterior, showing exactly how this tough, leathery integument acted almost like a shield. It kept them from drying out and helped them weather the incredibly harsh, arid, drought-afflicted conditions of that early Triassic environment. Section 3, Behavioral and Physiological Adaptations for Surviving Extreme Environments. Beyond just bone structure, Lystrosaurus had some very specific respiratory hardware that was absolutely essential for coping with the toxic atmosphere of a post-extinction world. Remember, One of the leading theories for the Permian extinction involves a drastic drop in atmospheric oxygen and a massive spike in carbon dioxide. To adapt to this, our survivor had a huge barrel chest to accommodate exceptionally large lungs, short internal nostrils to facilitate rapid breathing, and high neural spines on its back vertebrae to give its muscles greater leverage to actually expand that chest. Researchers strongly suggest these features helped it survive the low oxygen, high carbon dioxide stale air that it had to breathe, especially deep inside its underground burrows.
And their behavioral flexibility was just as impressive. We know Lystrosaurus lived way down in polar regions like Antarctica, which experienced extreme seasonal darkness. By examining the cross-sections of fossilized tusks from these Antarctic specimens, scientists found distinctive stress growth marks, just like tree rings. These marks strongly indicate periods of seasonal torpor or hibernation. This means that populations living in polar latitudes could effectively just shut their metabolisms down to survive months of freezing darkness and zero food.
Which brings us to Section 4, rapid growth and reproduction.
Surviving the initial blast of an extinction is one thing, but how did they recover their population numbers so aggressively? Well, it boils down to producing precocial offspring. To rebuild a biosphere, you have to reproduce effectively. The evidence points to Lystrosaurus laying soft, leathery eggs, and the hatchlings were highly precocial. By looking at preserved embryonic fossils, biologists can see they had enough yolk to develop robust, working jaws before they even hatched out of the egg. Unlike mammals that require a ton of nursing and milk, these hatchlings emerged relatively independent, and they were capable of eating hard foods almost the second they entered their harsh new world.
If we look at the broader life history strategy here, they likely produced small to medium-sized clutches, but their real secret weapon was their highly rapid, elastic growth rates. The microstructure of their fossilized bones tells us that Lystrosaurus reached sexual maturity incredibly early. They were actually capable of breeding while they were still actively growing long before they hit their maximum body size. By breeding early and growing fast, they managed to outpace the sky-high juvenile mortality rates of the early Triassic. They became a literal evolutionary engine for rapid population recovery.
Section 5. Generalists outlive the specialists. Let's do a quick comparative analysis. To truly appreciate this evolutionary success, we need to contrast our survivor with its relatives who didn't make it. Take Lystrosaurus macaulay, for example. This was a large, highly specialized species from the Permian. Because it was so big, it likely relied heavily on the large Glossopteris flora for its food source. Now contrast that with Lystrosaurus curvatus, which was a smaller, less specialized, flexible generalist. When the end Permian extinction wiped out those large Glossopteris forests, the specialist Lystrosaurus macaulay completely perished. It starved. But the unspecialized generalist, Lystrosaurus curvatus, it survived and thrived. This perfectly highlights a core evolutionary principle for you to remember. In the face of absolute global catastrophe, rigid specialists die, while flexible generalists inherit the Earth.
Finally, Section 6, proof of continental drift, and this animal's biogeographical legacy.
So how did the widespread distribution of this ugly little creature manage to revolutionize the entire field of geology? The history of its discovery is actually a really fascinating timeline. It started way back during the Gilded Age fossil feuds. It was named in 1870 by paleontologist Edward Drinker Cope from a skull found in South Africa. Literally the very next year, his bitter rival O.C. Marsh purchased a skull which sparked intense scientific scrutiny. But the real game changer happened about a century later, in 1969, when Edwin H. Colbert and his team discovered identical Lystrosaurus fossils at Coalsack Bluff, all the way in the Trans-Antarctic Mountains.
And that 1969 discovery provided the ultimate scientific payoff. Think about it. You have a fully terrestrial, burrowing animal, one that definitely, for sure, could not swim across open oceans. And it's isolated across modern separated continents. This provided undeniable proof for the theory of continental drift. When you map out where Lystrosaurus is found, South Africa, India, China, Russia, and crucially, Antarctica, it provides the ultimate biological validation that these currently isolated landmasses were, at one point, joined together as the massive supercontinent of Pangaea.
As we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a really provocative thought from the source material. It's a quote by paleontologist Michael Benton. He notes that for all of its remarkable adaptations, the burrowing, the flexible generalist diet, the rapid growth, he says, perhaps the survival of Lystrosaurus was simply a matter of luck. It begs a fascinating question for you to ponder as you leave today. In the face of absolute planetary devastation,
Is survival ultimately a triumph of biology and adaptation, or is it merely a roll of the evolutionary dice? Thank you for joining me, and keep questioning the science.